The town of Willow Creek was small, the kind where everybody knew each other's names and nothing ever truly changed. In this quiet place, two kids made a promise that was supposed to last forever. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime Virtually. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Don't forget to turn on post notifications for more videos. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Daniel Carter and Emily Brooks had been inseparable since they were 5 years old. Neighbors, classmates, and best friends, they did everything together, racing their bikes down Main Street, climbing trees in the park, and making up silly songs that only the two of them understood. One summer evening, as the golden sun dipped behind the hills, they sat on the old wooden bridge overlooking the river. The water reflected the sky's colors, making everything look magical. Daniel, always full of wild dreams, turned to Emily with a determined look in his blue eyes. "One day, I'm gonna leave this town and become a famous musician," he declared, gripping the wooden railing. "You'll see me on TV, winning awards, performing for thousands of people." Emily laughed, tucking a strand of her brown hair behind her ear. "And I'll be here, cheering for you." Daniel frowned. "No, you won't. You'll be with me. We'll travel the world together." She smiled but shook her head. "Daniel, not everyone is meant to be famous. I like it here. I like simple things. That's why I'll always come back for you," he said. "No matter how famous I get, I'll never forget you." Emily's heart warmed at his words. She knew Daniel meant it, but deep down, she also knew dreams had a way of pulling people apart. Still, under that fading sky, they made a promise. "Best friends forever?" Daniel asked, holding out his pinky. "Best friends forever," Emily whispered, linking her pinky with his. Neither of them knew how much that promise would be tested in the years to come. Life in Willow Creek stayed the same, but Daniel's world began to change. At 16, he started posting covers of popular songs on social media. His voice was raw yet full of emotion, and people loved it. One video went viral, then another, and soon a talent scout reached out. By 18, Daniel got an offer from a big record label. It meant leaving Willow Creek and moving to Los Angeles. Emily was proud of him, but she also felt something deep in her chest, an ache she couldn't name. "You're really going, huh?" she asked him the night before he left. They sat in her backyard, where they had spent countless evenings talking about everything and nothing. The stars above them felt bigger, like they knew things were changing. "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "But I'll come back. You know that, right?" Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "Just don't forget me when you're famous." Daniel took her hands in his. "Never. You're my best friend, Em. That won't change." But it did. At first, they texted every day. Daniel would send voice notes about his studio sessions, and Emily would tell him about life in Willow Creek. But as months turned into a year, the calls became less frequent. Texts went unanswered for days. Emily watched as Daniel's career exploded. His first album topped the charts. His face was on magazine covers. Paparazzi followed him everywhere. He was living his dream. And she? She was still in Willow Creek, working at the local bookstore, watching his success from a distance. One evening, Emily turned on the TV and saw Daniel at an award show, dressed in an expensive suit, flashing a smile that no longer looked like the boy she once knew. A beautiful actress stood next to him, whispering in his ear. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Daniel Carter, the world's new heartthrob." Emily turned off the TV, swallowing the lump in her throat. He had promised never to forget her. But maybe promises weren't meant to last forever. 5 years passed. Emily had stopped waiting for Daniel's texts. She had stopped checking his social media, stopped watching his interviews.
It was easier that way.
Willow Creek was still the same. Quiet, slow, predictable. Emily had found comfort in the simple life she always wanted. She worked at the bookstore, baked on weekends, and spent evenings reading on her porch. But one autumn afternoon, everything changed. A sleek black car rolled into Willow Creek, parking right in front of the bookstore. The door opened, and out stepped a man in dark jeans, a hoodie, and sunglasses. He pulled the hood down, and Emily's heart stopped. Daniel, the golden boy of the music industry. The one she had spent years trying to forget. He looked different, taller, broader, with an air of confidence that hadn't been there before. But when he turned and met her gaze, she saw something familiar in his blue eyes. Emily. His voice was softer than she expected. She gripped the book she was holding, forcing herself to breathe. What are you doing here? Daniel took a slow step forward. I needed to come home. I needed to see you. Emily let out a bitter laugh. After 5 years? You just show up? Regret flickered across his face. I know I messed up. I got caught up in everything, the fame, the pressure. But I never forgot you, Em. She wanted to believe him. But she had spent too many nights feeling like she was nothing more than a distant memory to him. You left, she whispered. And you never looked back. Daniel exhaled. I did. More times than you know. He hesitated, then added, I broke our promise, but I want to fix it. Emily studied him, unsure if she could trust him again. Why now? She asked. Daniel's expression softened. Because I've had everything I ever wanted, money, fame, success, but none of it meant anything without my best friend. Her heart wavered. She had dreamed of this moment, but reality was far more complicated. Could she let him back in? Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned back to the counter, pretending to arrange a stack of books. You can't just walk back into my life like nothing happened, Daniel, she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. You left. You changed. And I had to learn how to live without you. Daniel stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the small bookstore. I know, Em, and I hate myself for it. But I was scared. I thought if I kept moving, if I stayed busy, I wouldn't have to face how much I missed you. Emily let out a quiet scoff. Must have been real hard missing me from your $1 million mansion. Daniel flinched. He deserved that. It wasn't real, he admitted. None of it. The fame, the lifestyle, the people, it all felt empty. I thought success would make me happy, but all it did was make me realize what I lost. Emily's heart clenched. A part of her wanted to believe him, to run into his arms and pretend the last 5 years hadn't happened. But another part, the part that had spent nights crying over his absence, wasn't ready to forgive so easily. So, what now? She asked. You're just passing through? Here to ease your guilt before you run back to your perfect life. Daniel shook his head.
No.
I came back for good. Emily's breath hitched.
What?
I'm done with the industry, Em. I walked away from my contract. The fame, the pressure, it's not worth it anymore. Shock flooded through her. You gave it all up? Yes, Daniel said firmly. Because none of it matters if I don't have you. Silence hung between them. Emily searched his face for any sign of hesitation, any trace of the old Daniel she had known. I don't know if I can just forgive you, she admitted. I don't know if I can trust you not to leave again. Daniel reached for her hands, holding them gently. Then let me prove it to you. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to the boy she had once loved, the boy who had promised never to forget her. But could she let herself fall for him again? Emily stood there, staring at Daniel, feeling a storm of emotions she couldn't name. For years, she had convinced herself that she had moved on, that she had buried the pain of his absence deep enough that it couldn't hurt her anymore. But now here he was. The same boy who had once been her best friend. The same boy who had broken his promise. You say you want to prove it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But how do I know this isn't just another moment? That you won't leave again, when things get hard? Daniel tightened his grip on her hands. Because this time, I'm choosing you over everything else. Emily let out a shaky breath. You walked away from the life you built, Daniel. What if you regret it? I won't, he said without hesitation. None of it meant anything without you, Em. I thought I was chasing my dream, but I was really running away from the one thing that ever truly mattered. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that he meant every word. But the scars of the past weren't so easy to erase. I need time, she finally said. I can't just jump back into this like nothing happened. Daniel nodded. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to hope. True to his word, Daniel stayed. He rented a small house on the quiet side of town, far from the cameras and flashing lights. He started visiting the bookstore every morning, sometimes buying a book, sometimes just sitting in the corner, reading as Emily worked. He never pressured her, never forced a conversation. He was just there, reminding her that he meant what he said. At first, it was awkward. The years apart had built a wall between them, one that couldn't be torn down overnight. But slowly, things began to change. One evening, Emily was locking up the bookstore when she found Daniel waiting outside. "You need a ride home?" he asked, holding up his car keys. She hesitated, then nodded. The drive was quiet at first, the radio filling the silence. Then, Daniel chuckled softly. "Remember when we used to sing in my old truck? We were terrible." Emily smiled despite herself. "Speak for yourself." "I was amazing." Daniel laughed, a genuine, deep sound that sent warmth through her. From that night on, things got easier. They started taking walks together, like they used to. Daniel helped Emily fix up the bookstore, repainting the front door, and fixing a broken shelf. He even showed up at her favorite coffee shop one morning, already knowing her order. "You're trying too hard," she teased, but deep down she liked it. "I have to," Daniel admitted. "I lost you once. I won't lose you again." And just like that, the wall between them started to crumble. But Emily wasn't just worried about the past. She was afraid of the future. "What happens when the world realizes Daniel Carter is missing?" she asked him one night. "What happens when they come looking for you?" Daniel met her gaze. "Then they'll find me right here, exactly where I want to be." For the first time in years, Emily let herself believe it. Maybe this time he was really home to stay. Emily wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere between late-night walks and quiet bookstore moments, her heart softened. She found herself laughing more when Daniel was around. She caught herself looking for him in the morning, her stomach flipping when he walked through the bookstore door. The memories of their childhood no longer felt like something lost, but something being rebuilt, piece by piece. And that terrified her, because falling for Daniel again meant risking everything. One evening, they sat on a park bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft oranges and pinks. "You're thinking too much," Daniel said, nudging her with his shoulder. Emily sighed. "Can you blame me?" Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I know I hurt you, and I know trusting me again isn't easy. But I'm not that same guy anymore." She looked at him, really looked at him. Gone was the cocky teenage boy who had dreamed of fame. In his place was a man who had seen the world, lost himself, and found his way back home. "What if this doesn't work?" she whispered. Daniel turned to her, his blue eyes steady. "What if it does?" Emily's heart pounded. She had spent so long protecting herself from this exact moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she wanted to run anymore. She exhaled slowly. "Then I guess we find out together." Daniel's lips curled into a smile, and for the first time in years, Emily let herself hope. The night air was crisp, carrying the soft scent of pine and old books, the comforting smells of home. Emily and Daniel walked side by side, their fingers occasionally brushing against each other. Every time it happened, a jolt of warmth shot through her. It was terrifying how easily she was slipping back into him. They reached her porch, the glow of the street lamp casting a golden light over them. Emily turned to face him, her heart hammering in her chest. "Tonight was nice," she said softly. Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on her like she was the only thing that mattered.
"Yeah, it was."
Silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Daniel took a step closer. "Emily." Her breath hitched. She knew what was coming, could feel the tension in the air like static before a storm. Every part of her wanted to step back, to protect herself from what this moment meant. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her head up, meeting his gaze, waiting. Daniel hesitated, searching her eyes for permission. And when she didn't pull away, he slowly leaned in. The moment their lips touched, everything else faded. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, careful, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he moved too fast. His lips were warm, familiar, yet new all at once. Emily melted into him, her fingers gripping the front of his jacket as if to keep herself grounded. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he admitted. Emily let out a shaky laugh. "Me too." And just like that, the fear that had gripped her for so long began to loosen. Maybe, just maybe, this was worth the risk. In the days that followed their first kiss, things between Emily and Daniel shifted. It wasn't just the way he looked at her now, like she was the most important thing in his world. It was in the little things. The way he showed up at the bookstore with coffee, already knowing she liked hers with 2 sugars. The way he listened, really listened when she talked about her day. The way his fingers would brush hers, hesitant but full of unspoken promises. It felt new, yet familiar, like slipping into an old song and remembering every lyric. But not everyone was happy about their reunion. "You're really doing this?" Claire, Emily's best friend, asked one afternoon as they stocked books together. "You're giving him another chance?" Emily sighed, placing a novel on the shelf. "I don't know if it's about giving him a chance, Claire. I never stopped caring about him." "Caring is one thing," Claire said. "Trust is another." Emily knew Claire wasn't trying to be cruel. She was just worried. And deep down, Emily was too. That night, as she and Daniel walked along the riverbank, she finally voiced her fears. "What happens if this doesn't work?" she asked, staring at the water. "What if we end up hurting each other all over again?" Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Then we fight for it, Em. I'm not running this time. I don't care how hard it gets. I want us." She searched his face, looking for hesitation, doubt. But there was none. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. And maybe this time, love would be enough. For a while, everything felt perfect. Emily and Daniel fell into a rhythm, like they had never been apart. They spent lazy mornings at the bookstore, quiet evenings watching the sunset, and nights filled with laughter and whispered conversations. It felt real. It felt right. But love is never without its tests. One evening, as Emily closed up the bookstore, she noticed Daniel standing outside, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, a troubled look on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, stepping closer. Daniel hesitated before answering. "I got a call today from my old manager." Emily's stomach twisted.
And
"They want me back," he said, exhaling. "A big comeback. Interviews, a new album, everything. They say I still have a place in the industry." She felt her heart sink. This was it. The moment she had feared since he came back. "And what do you want?" she asked carefully. Daniel didn't answer right away. He ran a hand through his hair, looking torn. "I don't know, Music was my dream for so long, but after everything, I don't know if I want that life anymore." Emily nodded, trying to stay calm. "You don't have to decide right now. Just don't forget why you left in the first place." Daniel reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "I won't. You're the reason I came back, Emily. You're my home." She wanted to believe him, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if he leaves again? Would love be enough to keep him here?" The next few days were filled with an uneasy silence. Daniel was deep in thought, constantly checking his phone, lost in his own world. Emily tried to act like it didn't bother her, but the truth was it did. She had spent years piecing herself back together after losing him once. She wasn't sure she could survive it happening again. One evening, they sat on her couch, a movie playing in the background, though neither of them was watching it. "Are you going to take the offer?" Emily finally asked, breaking the silence. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know. A part of me misses it, being on stage, creating music. But I hate everything that comes with it. The pressure, the fake friendships, the feeling of never belonging anywhere." Emily hesitated before asking the question that had been haunting her. "If you go back, where does that leave us?" Daniel looked at her, pain in his eyes. "I don't want to leave, But what if you do?" she whispered. "I need to know." He ran a hand down his face. I want both. I want my music and I want you. But I don't know if I can have both. Emily's heart clenched. She had spent so long being afraid of this moment, and now that it was here, she realized something painful. She couldn't be the reason he gave up his dream. Daniel, if music is what makes you happy, then you should go. His head snapped up.
What?
No, Emily. I love you, she said, her voice trembling. But I won't hold you back. I won't be the reason you look back one day and wonder what could have been. Daniel grabbed her hands, his grip desperate. I don't care about fame, Em. I care about you. Tears burned her eyes. Then prove it. He stared at her, torn between his past and his future. And for the first time, Emily had no idea which one he would choose. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Emily's words echoing in his mind. Then prove it. It should have been simple. He loved her. He didn't want to lose her again. That should have been enough. But was it? Music had been his life for so long. It was all he had ever known. And now, after years of running from it, the door had swung open again, inviting him back in. By morning, he still didn't have an answer. Emily acted normal when they met at the bookstore, but he could see it in her eyes. She was bracing herself for the worst. Let's take a walk, he said. She hesitated, then nodded, grabbing her coat. They walked in silence for a while, the cool breeze rustling the trees. Finally, Daniel stopped and turned to her. I made my choice. Emily swallowed hard. Okay. I turned it down. Her eyes widened. What? I turned it down, he repeated. Not because I don't love music, but because I love you more. Tears welled up in her eyes. Daniel, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he said softly. She let out a shaky breath, and before she could say another word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her like he never wanted to let go. You are my dream now, Emily, he whispered against her hair. And I'm not walking away this time. As she held him tighter, a single thought filled her heart. Maybe, just maybe, love was enough. The days that followed felt like a dream. Daniel had chosen her. He had chosen them. And yet, a small part of Emily still feared he would regret it. One evening, as they sat on the bookstore floor surrounded by scattered books, Daniel nudged her shoulder. You're quiet. Emily looked up, biting her lip. I guess I'm just wondering if you'll miss it. He sighed, leaning back against the shelf. Maybe a little. But Emily, I wasn't happy in that life. The fame, the pressure, it was exhausting. You're the first thing in a long time that feels real to me. Her heart swelled, but doubt lingered. And if they call again? If they offer you something even bigger? Daniel reached for her hand. Then I'll still be right here, choosing you. Every single time. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time, she truly believed him. That night, as they lay on the couch watching an old movie, Daniel suddenly sat up. I have an idea. Emily raised an eyebrow. Oh no. That look means trouble.
He grinned.
Hear me out. What if I start something new? Not the industry. Not the fame. Just music for the love of it. Small gigs, writing songs for others. Doing it on my own terms. Emily smiled. That sounds perfect. And you'll be there, he asked, squeezing her hand. Every step of the way. And just like that, the future no longer felt uncertain. It felt exciting. Because this time, they were building it together. Months passed, and life took on a new kind of rhythm. One filled with love, laughter, and dreams they built together. Daniel kept his promise. He started playing at small venues, not for fame, but for the love of music. And Emily was always there, cheering him on from the front row. One evening, after a beautiful performance at a cozy cafe, Daniel took Emily's hand and led her outside, where fairy lights twinkled above the quiet street. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. Emily's heart pounded. Daniel. He pulled out a small, worn notebook. Confused, she took it from him and flipped it open. Inside were lyrics, pages and pages of songs, all about her. Every song I've written since I came back, it's all about you, he said softly. Because, Emily, You are my greatest love story." Her eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, Before she could finish, he dropped to one knee. "I've lost you once, and I never want to go through that again. I don't need a stage. I don't need a crowd. All I need is you." He pulled out a simple, elegant ring. "Marry me, Emily." A sob escaped her lips as she nodded.
Yes.
1,000,000 times yes. The moment he slipped the ring onto her finger, the world around them disappeared. It was just them, as it had always been. Childhood best friends. Soulmates. Forever. And as Daniel kissed her under the fairy lights, Emily knew this was the love story she had always dreamed of. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.